This favorite party trick was telling the story of how I flamed out of my first year at Wharton. She'd wait for a lull in the conversation, usually around the second round of drinks, and then she'd lean in like she was about to share something delightfully scandalous. My daughter actually tried business school, she'd say with this little smile that never quite reached her eyes. Lasted 8 months. The pressure just wasn't for her. Then she'd shrug, like I was a souffle that collapsed. Like 8 months of my life and $60,000 of student loans I was still paying off was just a funny anecdote she'd collected somewhere. She told that story at dinner parties, at her firm's holiday mixers, at my cousin's wedding rehearsal dinner, with me sitting 3 seats down, staring into my glass of Pinot Grigio, trying to decide if the floor would actually open up and swallow me if I wished hard enough. She told it for 4 years, and the thing that nobody knew, the thing I hadn't told a single person, was that I didn't flame out. I didn't crack under pressure. I left because of her. Because of what she did. And I only got the chance to say that out loud in front of 230 people, with my mother sitting in the third row when I was 31 years old and finally had proof she couldn't explain away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My mother is one of the most respected forensic accountants in Philadelphia. Her name is in the biolines of 2 different textbooks used in graduate programs. She built her career from nothing. First-generation college student. Clawed her way into a Big Four firm in her 20s. Made partner before 40. I grew up watching her work at the kitchen table late at night, still in her blazer, highlighter in hand, the glow of spreadsheets reflected in her reading glasses. I worshipped her. I wanted to be her. When I got into Wharton's MBA program, she cried. Happy tears, she said. She hugged me in the kitchen and told me I was going to do things she never got to do. You're starting from further ahead than I did, she said. Don't waste it. I didn't plan to. My mother's firm, I'll call it Callaway and Associates, had a consulting relationship with a regional investment fund called Ardmore Capital. It wasn't a huge operation, maybe 40 employees, but it managed money for a lot of old money Philadelphia families, and it had the kind of reputation that was worth more than its actual size. My mother had done their forensic auditing for years. She knew their books, the way she knew our house, every room, every corner. In my second semester, I did a consulting practicum, part of the MBA curriculum, where students get embedded with real companies. Ardmore Capital was one of the placements. I jumped at it. My mother connected me to the managing partner, a man I'll call Mr. Voss. He was charming in that old-school way, the kind of man who had a firm handshake and remembered your coffee order and made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. My mother had known him for 15 years. He'd been at my parents' anniversary dinner. He called her by her first name and laughed at her jokes, and once sent us a fruit basket at Christmas with a card that said, "To the Hargrove family." I thought I was lucky. I thought this placement was going to be the thing that launched me. For the first 6 weeks, it was fine. I was learning, doing low-level analysis work, sitting in on meetings I had no business being in. Then, around week 7, something started nagging at me. I was working on a routine report about one of Ardmore's client portfolios, a retirement fund belonging to an older couple in their 70s. The kind of clients who had saved their whole lives and were now trusting someone else to protect it. As I was cross-referencing the fund's stated returns against the actual transaction records, the numbers didn't line up. Not by a lot. By about $240,000 over 18 months. It wasn't a rounding error. It wasn't a clerical mistake. It was a pattern. Specific transaction types. Specific time windows. Specific accounts. I stared at that spreadsheet for probably 3 hours before I let myself believe what I was looking at. I didn't go to Mr. Voss. I went to my mother. I called her on a Tuesday night and told her what I'd found. I described the discrepancies. I told her the account numbers. I walked her through the pattern. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Send me everything. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Let me look at it." I sent her everything that night. She called me back 2 days later. "I reviewed it," she said. "It's not what you think. There are deferred fee structures in that portfolio that aren't visible from the reports you were looking at. The discrepancy is explained. You didn't have the full picture." I felt relief for about 48 hours. Then I couldn't sleep. Something kept pulling at me. Because I had been thorough. I'd looked for exactly those kinds of fee structures. I looked for deferred arrangements, performance-based offsets, everything I'd learned in my financial accounting coursework. The discrepancy wasn't explained by any of it. I checked. So I checked again. I pulled the original documents. I dug deeper than I was technically authorized to dig, which I know wasn't smart, but I needed to know. And what I found the second time was worse than the first. The deferred fee structures my mother mentioned, they didn't exist. There were no documents supporting them. What existed instead were a series of small internal transfers, routed through a subsidiary account, that had been papered over with transaction notes in a format I recognized. It was the format my mother's firm used. My mother hadn't just dismissed what I found, she'd covered it up before I could show anyone. I sat in my apartment for 2 days. I didn't go to the practicum. I barely ate. I ran through every possible explanation that didn't mean what I was terrified it meant. I wrote out timelines. I wrote out what I knew versus what I was inferring. I talked myself in circles. Then I made a decision. I went to my practicum supervisor at Wharton, a professor I'll call Dr. Ingram. I told her I'd discovered what appeared to be financial irregularities in my placement, and that I had reason to believe the discrepancy had been deliberately obscured. I didn't name my mother. Not yet. I gave Dr. Ingram the documents I'd compiled and asked her what the right next step was. She told me she had to escalate it to the program director. I said I understood. What happened next took about 3 weeks, and I was on the outside of all of it. I wasn't in those meetings. I didn't know what was being said. What I knew was that at the end of those 3 weeks, Dr. Ingram called me into her office and told me that the program had reviewed my concerns and determined they didn't rise to the level of requiring an external referral. The placement would continue. I was encouraged to focus on the learning outcomes of the practicum rather than areas outside my scope. I asked her directly, "Did someone speak to my mother about this?" She didn't answer. I withdrew from the practicum the next day. My mother called me 2 nights later. I was in my apartment packing a bag. I'd already decided I wasn't going back. The conversation was short. "Dr. Ingram told me you reported concerns about your placement," she said. "I did," I said. I explained to her that what you found was a misinterpretation, that you didn't have the full context for those transactions. I know what you told her. "You almost did serious damage to a client relationship that my firm has spent 15 years building. A retired couple is short $240,000. Mom, that is not what those documents show to anyone who understands the full structure. Then explain it to me. Right now. Walk me through it." She didn't. She said I was being impulsive. That I was acting like a first-year student who thought she understood more than she did. She said she had handled it, and I needed to let it go, and that if I continued pursuing this narrative, I would create problems for everyone, including myself. I withdrew from Wharton 2 weeks later. I didn't tell anyone why. What was I going to say? My mother, one of the most credentialed forensic accountants in Philadelphia, told my graduate program that I had misread documents I wasn't qualified to interpret, and they believed her? Who was going to believe me? She started telling the story about 6 months later. The first time I heard it was at Thanksgiving. She said it to my aunt while I was in the kitchen, refilling the water pitcher. She really struggled with the rigor, my mother said. Some people find out late that they're not built for that environment. It's not a failure exactly. It's information. It's information. I stood in the kitchen for a long time before I went back to the table. I moved to Chicago after I left. I got a job as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm. Nothing glamorous, but honest work, and I was good at it. Over the next 4 years, I rebuilt. I got my CPA. I pursued a specialization in forensic accounting. Yes, I know how that sounds, and I turned out to be exceptionally good at it. Maybe because I was motivated in a very specific way. I didn't talk to my mother much during those years. Holidays, sometimes. Brief phone calls. She still told the story at parties I heard through my aunt. She'd refined it by then. Added a detail here and there. Sometimes I couldn't handle the coursework. Sometimes I'd had a breakdown. The story grew like a vine, filling in whatever shape was convenient. I kept a folder on my laptop. I'd kept copies of everything I'd found during the practicum. The transaction records, the internal transfers, the document formatting that matched my mother's firm. I'm not sure why I kept them. Some combination of self-protection and inability to let go. I looked at that folder sometimes, late at night, the way you look at something you've never figured out what to do with. Then, about 14 months ago, I got a call from a man named Garrett, a compliance officer at a financial regulatory body. I'm not going to be more specific than that. He told me that his office had received a complaint about Ardmore Capital from a client. During the investigation, documents had surfaced that referenced my mother's firm's accounting work on a specific set of client accounts. My name had appeared in some internal records as a former practicum student who had been involved in reviewing those accounts. He asked if I would be willing to speak with investigators. I said yes. And then I opened my laptop and started writing the longest email I have ever written in my life. The investigation took 11 months. I'm not going to detail the outcome here because there are aspects that are still ongoing. What I can tell you is that what I found during my practicum was real. The couple who was short $240,000 were not the only ones. There were other accounts. There were other clients. The pattern I had identified in my second semester as a 26-year-old graduate student who had never done forensic accounting professionally. That pattern was real. My mother knew. I don't know how long she had known. I don't know when she stopped being someone who caught irregularities and became someone who hid them. I don't know if it was gradual. I don't know what Mr. Boss offered her, or whether it was money or favors, or just the comfort of not blowing up a 15-year relationship. I don't know what she told herself. What I know is that she called Dr. Ingram and told her I was an inexperienced student who had misread documents. She let them redirect me. She watched me leave my graduate program, and then she went to Thanksgiving and told my aunt I wasn't built for the pressure. 6 weeks ago, I was invited to present at a compliance and ethics conference in Washington, D.C. The conference is held annually and draws professionals from regulatory bodies, accounting firms, law firms, financial institutions. About 230 people. It's a serious conference, not a big stage, but the kind of room where the right people are paying attention. I was asked to present on a case study about whistleblower disclosures in financial settings. Specifically, cases where institutional relationships created barriers to reporting. I was given 45 minutes and told I could structure it however I wanted. My mother was also at the conference. She'd been invited as part of a panel the following day. I didn't know she was coming until I saw the attendee list 2 weeks before. And when I saw her name, I sat with it for a long time. I want to be honest here. I didn't design my presentation to ambush her. The structure I built was the structure that best illustrated the case study, but I also didn't redesign it when I found out she'd be in the room. I thought about it. I went back and forth, and then I decided that I'd spent 4 years being the collateral damage of her story. I wasn't going to rewrite mine around her comfort. My first slide was a timeline. It started in the fall of my first year at Wharton and ended 14 months ago when Garrett called me. Every major event, dated. The practicum placement, the discrepancy I found, the call to my mother, a call to Dr. Ingram, my withdrawal, the regulatory investigation. My second slide was a document excerpt, redacted, reviewed by the conference's legal team, cleared for use. It was a portion of the internal communication my mother had sent to Dr. Ingram's office. It was not aggressive. It was not dramatic. It was just a very calm, very professional email explaining that her daughter had reviewed materials without full context, and that the concerns raised did not reflect an actual irregularity, and that she had reviewed the accounts herself and found everything to be in order. She signed it with her credentials, her CPA designation, her partner title, the full weight of her professional reputation deployed to close a door I had tried to open. I had been presenting for about 12 minutes when I put that slide up. I didn't look at my mother, I looked at the room, and I said, the most significant barrier to whistleblower disclosure is rarely institutional, it's relational. It's the phone call you make to someone you trust, not realizing that their interests are not the same as yours, and not realizing that they have both the access and the authority to make sure your concerns go nowhere. I talked for another 32 minutes. I talked about what I'd found, and what had happened, and what the investigation had uncovered. I talked about what it had cost me, professionally, financially, in ways that don't fit into a spreadsheet. I talked about the retired couple whose retirement account had been treated like a slush fund. I talked about the other clients. I talked about what it means to report something when the person you report to has more at stake in the cover-up than in the truth. I did not cry. I had practiced that part. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. That specific kind of quiet that's different from silence. The kind where 230 people are all processing something at the same time. Then the applause started. I looked at my mother for the first time. She was in the third row. She was not applauding. She was looking at her hands. She found me in the hallway during the break. I knew she would. She didn't yell. That's not her style. She stood in front of me, and she said very quietly, "You should have told me you were going to do this." "I didn't know you were coming," I said. "You knew eventually. You could have called me." I thought about that for a second. "You could have called me," I said, 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, or the first time you told someone at a party that I wasn't built for pressure." She looked at me. She looked older than I expected, in a way I hadn't noticed in the room. Not frail. She's never been frail, but tired. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had forgotten she was carrying it. "I was protecting the firm," she said. "I know," I said. "You protected the firm. You protected Mr. Voss. You protected 15 years of a client relationship. I know exactly what you were protecting." I paused. "I just wanted you to say it out loud where you couldn't reword it later." She didn't say anything else. She walked back toward the conference room. "I'm not going to tell you we've had a tearful reconciliation. We haven't talked since that hallway. I don't know if we will. There are parts of me that still remember being 11 years old, watching her work at the kitchen table, thinking she was the most impressive person I'd ever seen. There are parts of me that miss her in a way that doesn't make logical sense given everything I know now. Grief is strange. You can grieve people who are still alive. You can grieve a version of someone that may have never existed exactly the way you believed. The couple whose retirement account was affected. I know through the investigation that they have been contacted and that restitution proceedings are underway. That matters to me more than anything else about this. More than the conference, more than the hallway, more than any of it. 2 people who did everything right, worked hard, saved carefully, trusted the wrong firm, deserve to have someone say out loud what happened to them. I wasn't able to do that when I was 26. I'm glad someone finally did. The story my mother used to tell, the one about her daughter who tried business school and found out the pressure wasn't for her. I don't know if she's still telling it. Maybe the room it lived in has gotten smaller. Maybe the people who heard it are starting to understand that there was always more to it. I'm not telling my story to get back at her. I've thought about that a lot, and I genuinely don't think that's what this is. I'm telling it because when I was 26 years old and sitting across from my mother with a spreadsheet that showed exactly what it showed, I needed to know that someone else had been in that position. That you can see something clearly and be told you're confused. That you can do the right thing and lose everything anyway for a while. That for a while doesn't have to be forever. If you're in a position right now where you know something and the person you trusted to tell is the person you should have been afraid of, I want you to keep copies of everything. I want you to find the Dr. Ingrams who will actually listen, because they exist, even if the first one didn't. I want you to know that the patience required to wait for the right moment is not the same as letting it go. Sometimes it just means building the kind of life where your name means something when you finally say it out loud. I'm still paying off my student loans from 8 months at Wharton. My mother's name is still in 2 textbook bio lines. Some things don't resolve keenly. But I stood in a room with 230 people, and I told the true version of what happened. In my voice, with my name on the slides. That part is mine now. She can't rewrite it. I've thought a lot about what actually made my mother do what she did. Not the mechanics of it. I understand those. I've spent years understanding those. I mean the thing underneath. The decision, at some point, to look at what I'd found and choose the firm over the truth. Choose Mr. Voss over me. Choose the story she could control over the one that was actually real. I don't think she woke up one morning and decided to become someone who covers things up. I think it happened slowly, the way most compromises do. A small accommodation here. A professional loyalty that stretched a little further than it should have. A 15-year relationship that started to feel like something worth protecting at almost any cost. And then I called her on a Tuesday night with a spreadsheet. And she had to decide, fast, which thing she was going to be. She chose wrong. And then she spent 4 years building a story around that choice so she didn't have to look at it directly. That's the part I keep coming back to, not the betrayal itself. Though that's real and it cost me things I can't fully calculate. But the narrative she constructed afterward. The way she shaped it, polished it, repeated it, until it had the smooth, convincing surface of something true. My daughter couldn't handle the pressure, said with just enough warmth to sound like concern. Just enough resignation to sound like wisdom. She was good at it. She'd spent decades building credibility, and she used every bit of it to rewrite what happened between us. What I've learned, slowly, and not without a lot of painful nights staring at that folder on my laptop, is that the truth doesn't need protecting the way a lie does. A lie has to be maintained. It has to be told consistently, updated carefully, defended whenever someone gets close to the edges. A lie is work. The truth just sits there, waiting. I waited 4 years. I built something real. I got my CPA. I developed an actual specialty. I became someone whose name meant something in a room full of people who understood the work. And when the moment came, not one I manufactured, not one I forced, but one that arrived because of who I had become and what I had done, I walked into that room and I told the true version. That's the thing about integrity that nobody warns you about when you're young. It's not always immediately rewarded. Sometimes you do the right thing and you lose. You lose your program, your career path, your relationship with a parent, your sense of the world as a place where honesty is protected. That loss is real. It's not a lesson disguised as a setback. It actually hurts. But the person you become on the other side of it, the person who kept copies, who kept going, who rebuilt without compromising what she knew to be true, that person has something that can't be taken away or reworded in a party anecdote. You can't outsource integrity. You can't inherit it. You can't fake it in front of 230 people who do this work for a living. My mother built her reputation over 30 years. I watched her do it. I learned from it, in more ways than one. What I know now that she maybe forgot somewhere along the way is that a reputation built on burying the truth is a structure with a bad foundation. It can look solid for a long time, but it doesn't hold forever. The retired couple whose money disappeared, they deserved someone to say out loud what happened to them. I wasn't able to do that at 26. I'm glad I was able to be part of doing it at 31. That's the part of the story that actually matters to me. Not the conference, not the slide, not the look on my mother's face. The fact that something true, which had been buried, finally made it back to the surface. That's all I ever wanted. From the very beginning, on a Tuesday night with a spreadsheet. That's all I was ever trying to do.